Bob Dylan. Welcome to Bob Dylan. This was my fourth take attempting this video. If I make it past his college years this time, I will be thrilled. Hi, welcome to Bob Dylan. If you don't know who Bob Dylan is, well, you're about to find out because that's what this presentation is on. Hopefully you can hear me over the wind. I don't even know at this point, but I give up. So if we mess up, we're just rolling with. Okay, hi, this is Bob Dylan. Bob Dylan is a singer-songwriter. He is most well known for his folk and protest songs, although he did briefly delve into the realm of gospel and rock and roll. So, he was born May 24th, 1941 in Duluth, Minnesota. He grew up there until he was 6, at which point the family moved to Hibbing after his father caught polio. As a kid in high school, he loved music. He played in many bands. He attributed his musical interest to Buddy Holly, who he got to see perform just a few days before Buddy Holly died in a plane crash at the ripe old age of 22, the day the music died. He attended the University of Minnesota for 1 year, majoring in music, and was very active in the musical community there and the local music scene around the University of Minnesota. Also, during this time in college, he renamed himself from Robert Zimmerman, his birth name, which I think I forgot to mention at the beginning. He renamed himself from Robert Zimmerman to Bob Dylan, naming himself after the poet, Dylan Thomas. In 1961, he moved to New York City to be near his idol, Woody Guthrie, having been inspired by a Pete Seeger concert. Now, Pete Seeger was one of Woody's closest friends and most frequent visitors at the hospital. Well, I should tell you about the hospital, actually, first. Woody Guthrie was hospitalized for the better part of a decade due to Huntington's disease, which is basically a neurological condition that makes you, it's dementia and, it shuts down your body. So he was hospitalized. So Bob Dylan moved to New York City to be nearer to him instead of, Minnesota. He would take the bus trip from New York City to the hospital. Often it was about 90 minutes. While Bob Dylan lived in New York City, he was very active in the Greenwich Village folk music scene. He would perform at, all of the local bars and clubs and all that. He came out with his debut album in 1962. On it, it was mostly old folk songs. There were 2 songs of his own composition. One of them was Song to Woody. It was a song that he based on Woody Guthrie's song, The 1913 Massacre, which was a song about a bunch of coal miners on strike that got massacred. Where was I? Something Song to Woody. Yeah, we love Song to Woody. Okay, great. So in 1963, he came out with The Freewheeling Bob Dylan, which gave us most of his protest songs. So think things like Blowing in the Wind and The Times They Are Changing and Don't Think Twice, which isn't a protest song, but it can be if you're angry enough. Yeah. So then in 1964 and 1965, his style began to change. He shifted away more from the traditional folk aspect into a sort of new rock and roll pop-y aspect. He started coming out with more electric instruments on his songs. This gave us Bringing It All Back Home, which is an album of his, yes. But that album gave us Subterranean Homesick Blues, this, and also Like a Rolling Stone. My favorite and perhaps one of the most well-known Bob Dylan songs. Oh yes, Judas. 1965 Newport Folk Festival he performed. He also performed at the 1963 and 1964 Newport Folk Festivals, but the people loved him. Anyway, so at the Newport Folk Festival in 1965, he was basically booed off the stage. He was asked to return by the MC and performed an encore. Now, the original songs that he had performed were all his more electric-y, modern folk songs. The 2 that he performed after the encore were traditional folk, acoustic guitar, all that. He was met with applause to his encore. So anyway, that brings us to Judas. In 1966, Bob Dylan was on tour in England at a show in Manchester. A fan, angry at his switching from folk music to more electric instruments, yelled out Judas, declaring him a betrayer, basically. And Bob's response was, "I don't believe you. You're a liar." And then he instructed the band to play it loud. And they launched into Like a Rolling Stone, perhaps one of his, at the time, most electric songs. Oh, that's fun. So, yeah, so in July 1966, the stress of being both loved and hated by his fans was starting to catch up to him. He was in a motorcycle crash in July, but here's the thing, is nobody knows, I don't think I can get that earring back in, it's fine. Nobody knows if he was actually in a crash or if the crash was as bad as it sounds, because he claims to have broken several bones in his neck and the rest of his body, but he never went to a doctor or the hospital or anything for it. So nobody knows if it was as serious as it sounds, or if he just needed the excuse to take time off from touring and being a pop culture icon. So he came back, eventually. And that gives us the 1970s. Now, does anyone remember the 70s? I don't remember the 70s. So he came out with 11 albums in the 70s, which is a lot of albums, first of all. The 1970s gave us Blood on the Tracks, which is seen by many critics as his best album. Now, I am not many critics, but, you know, it's fine. During that time, he was still touring and evolving into, you know, Bob Dylan. All right. Now, Bob Dylan was raised Jewish. He converted in the 70s from Judaism to evangelical Christianity in the late 1970s. He came out with a couple of religious albums, which is where that worship gospel music comes in. In addition to his songs, he also wrote several books. He wrote Tarantula, which is very beatnik, stream of conscience, crazy chaos that doesn't even make much sense. But, you know, it's Tarantula. It's Bob Dylan. It's peak Bob Dylan, I think. He also hosted a radio show, but he also, in addition, wrote 2 different memoirs, Chronicles Volume 1 and Volume 2. Now, Chronicles were full of lies. There's a lot of things in it that people say didn't actually happen. A lot of messed up dates, some fuzzy memories, some out of order stuff, some things that definitely didn't happen that he just lied about. Which brings us to Bob Dylan's lies. So Bob Dylan liked to tell a lot of lies, right? He used to say that he was a runaway. Pete Seeger at one point, well actually at several points, would introduce him as the kid that ran away 17 times and was brought back 16, which is not true. He never actually ran away from home. He also liked to imply to his friends that he grew up in foster homes. And another favorite tale of his was that he worked in the circus. He did not, in fact, work in the circus. Now, here's the interesting thing, is that while these lies were lies for Robert Zimmerman, they were true for Bob Dylan, the character that he was creating and playing, because Bob Dylan isn't really Bob Dylan. Bob Dylan is the character that he decides to be. That takes us, if I can separate pages, to the awards. Now, he has won several awards. Bob Dylan was awarded the 2012 Presidential Medal of Freedom. He also won the 2016 Nobel Prize in Literature, making him the first songwriter to ever do such. His song lyrics apparently had enough of an impact on the world to be considered literature, I guess. He's also a member of the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. Bob Dylan has been on tour since 1988. It is commonly referred to as his never-ending tour. He plays 100 shows a year at least, and he's still coming out with albums. He came out with albums in 2023 and 2024. In addition to A Complete Unknown, the movie that recently came out over Christmas that he was responsible for helping with, because it's about him. Even though, again, Bob Dylan lies. Alright, in conclusion, Bob Dylan went from some random Minnesota kid to a pop culture icon, basically. He was constantly changing and evolving and creating himself into the persona that he wished to be. He enables us to change how we see both ourselves and the world around us, and the character that we decide to be. I forgot some things, I think. It's fine. It's okay. We're fine. Also, here's your 2 fun facts. He performed at the March on Washington with Joan Baez, B-A-E-Z, her. Yeah. Love her. I still don't know how to pronounce her name. He performed at the March on Washington. Yeah, the I Have a Dream March on Washington with her. Anyway, he's the one that introduced the Beatles to marijuana. Yeah, that's it.